Hey guys, Rebel Legend 95, recording live from your local county prison cell. First of all, I'm right near a main road, so it might get a little noisy. Sorry about that. Secondly, this fight is a doozy, so strap in here because there's a lot of lore and a lot of character development that I'm gonna have to go through, and it's gonna take a second here. This fight is Furn the Human from Adventure Time and Flowey from Undertale. Oh, all right. So, I mean, first off, the connections here I think are pretty solid. I mean, it's more on the surface they're just they're people who are reincarnated as plants, yes, but there's also the underlying message of like looking for purpose, not knowing who you are, or uh you know hating others because of your having your own insecurities and things like that. There's a lot of deep emotional stuff here that I think is pretty good to latch on to from a character standpoint. However, like I said, these two have very, very complex backstories. So I'm gonna try my best here. So Furn. Well, in order to go into Furn's backstory, first we have to start with the time where a cosmic being whose name I do not remember, and right, basically had a backup plan in case he was ever destroyed to have a past version of Finn and Jake, or to have an eventual version of Finn and Jake at the time, I should say. Or a version of Jake, rather, to resurrect him. And Finn, at the time, disrupts Jake from doing this, and the being, after having been resurrected already, somehow tells Finn to stop his past self from stopping Jake from doing it, right? Okay. To prevent an infinity paradox, I guess. Now, when he did this past version of Finn, now, I say past, I mean by like minutes, was turned into a sword. Or at least that's what we thought, because we find out that he wasn't turned into a sword, he was trapped inside a sword. And pretty much remained dormant and silent until he wasn't, and we realized what was going on. I believe the thought at the time was that it was an alternate reality version of Finn, but no, it turns out it's just Finn. It's just himself trapped in that sword. Until the sword was broken by Finn, where in a life or death situation regrew the grass sword. The grass sword being a sword that Finn obtained from a grass wizard that was originally meant to be a curse, but he accepted it, so he learned to control it, and then he used it to try to prevent his dad from leaving him again, and then he lost an arm, and then he regrew the arm from it, and it was like permanently a part of him after that, because it was, yeah. Anyway, well, turns out the grass sword is possessed by a grass demon who infiltrates the inside of the Finn sword and offers this Finn, who has been at this point trapped in a sword for, I believe, like 3 years or something, offers him a choice. You can have a body and you can live in your world and live your life again if you let me basically possess you. And he takes that. Now, at this point, this is just a grass creature who believes he's Finn. He has all of Finn's memories. He has all of Finn's past experiences. He knows all of the people Finn knows. He believes he is, because deep down he really is. It's not until he realizes that his life is no longer his life, that the person he is that role is being taken by somebody else, and he is now back in his world, and there's no place for him. That's when he stops going by Finn and changes to Furn, the human. Now, as Furn, being possessed by the grass demon, he does get a lot of abilities. He is just walking, living vegetation, essentially. And he does gain the grass sword. Now, I should talk about the grass sword specifically, because it has a history in the show that is worth noting. This thing is super sharp, to the point where, and it also has some part of the curse of it is it has some inherent level of skill attached to it that the user, without even trying, can access, to the point where it makes quote-unquote unnaturally perfect cuts, again, without the holder even trying. And Furn, having all of Finn's past, battle experience and life experience, he's able to basically use the grass sword the way that Finn was able to before. Except also, he doesn't have the physical limitations of a body. He doesn't have to eat. He doesn't have to, he can regrow limbs. I mean, Finn regrew limb as well, but he can just regrow them like new. He can even transform into a giant kind of grass demon-ish figure. But it was just a reference to Gawain and the Green Knight. Yeah, he can stretch out his limbs and all of that. He can completely smother you in vines and things like that. He's like a grass monster. In fact, I believe it was his connection to Finn that eventually led to him dying. And he even, I forget if it was regeneration or somebody tampered with it or something, but he even came back from Finn basically, chopping him to pieces, like, accidentally, just, like, slicing him into a million pieces with the, fatality setting on his robotic arm. And speaking of which, that robotic arm that Princess Bubblegum built Finn, Furn was able to overpower. So, add superhumanness just to his resume as well. That being said, eventually Furn would find his place in some misguided attempts, like trying to kidnap or trying to imprison and replace Finn, or trying to become the knight for a kingdom that would try to restart the Candy Wars. But soon he became kind of an understanding, almost brother-like figure to Finn, where he would get upset that Finn still had the life that he deserved, but he realized he had to make his own life, and eventually ends up dying, but becoming the new tree for the next generation thousands of years later. So his role in Adventure Time history is sealed. Now on to Flowey. If I had a shot, this is where I would take it. So, there once was a great war between humans and monsters. And the Prince of Monsters, I believe his name is Azrael or Azizariel or something like that, once took in an injured human despite the war. And the human ended up not surviving, the human child. So Azrael, upon the human's wish to see the flower fields one more time, took the human soul across the soul barrier, being like the divide between the human and the monster world. And, well, the monsters didn't care for that because they believed that Prince Azrael had killed a child, and they attacked him. So, upon arriving at the fields that the child's soul wished to be born at, he ends up dying. And many years later, through some experimentation on some of the flowers, ends up being reincarnated as a flower known as Flowey. Now, when I say reincarnated, I mean, I guess, psychically, because Flowey notably does not have a soul, which means he is not capable of feeling love or compassion of any kind, and pretty much without the once beloved and kind prince that was known for his, that died for the wish of a human child, now is stuck, as a plant, and has no idea what to do without the ability to love and care for others. And over the years, this would turn to rage and murder, because, well, that's about all he can feel at this point. So as Flowey, he has the ability to shoot many different types of projectile and energy-based attacks. I believe there was like fire magic. There was what is it? Help pellets, I believe they're called, but they actually harm you. There's multiple other. It's hard to really ascertain which is what because they're just more or less dots on a screen. But yeah, but as I said, Flowey, they are stuck in a pot or in the ground or, what have you. Right? The other thing that Flowey no longer has is the ability to save and reset. Now, saving and resetting are not just game mechanics. In the Undertale universe, they are actually reality warping abilities. It is the ability to pin down a specific point in space and time and, bring yourself back to that point. Bring your current self back to yourself at that point. So, yes, it works similarly to those mechanics, but it is an in-canon universe thing. It's not like just a thing you do because it's a video game. Flowey does not have that ability, but at one point did. And still retained the memories of every time that the world was saved and reset, and also, in addition to saving and resetting, restarting the game doesn't clean the slate. Flowey retains the memories of all of your different playthroughs up until the point where I believe you kill them. So Flowey has like some multi-dimensional sense of awareness as well, which is crazy. You can see why a character might get driven to murderous rage after something like that. So, and also there's the other thing I gotta point out, but I don't think it's relevant to the situation. If Flowey obtains 6 human souls, similar to the one that Azrael obtained and let loose in the flower fields, if Flowey obtains 6 human souls, they will become similar to their former self, and become, I've heard it referred to as Omega Flowey, I've heard it referred to as Photoshop Flowey, the god of hyper death. I think these might all actually even be different things. I don't even know, to be honest. I'm not super versed with Undertale. And would regain the ability to save and reset, right? Basically making Flowey a time god, right? As well as become much more powerful with their attacks. Now, you might say, well, this just makes this an absolute squash. Why are you putting a guy reincarnated as a plant against a god of hyper death and space time? Well, one of two reasons. A, they specifically have to be human souls, which I think criteria-wise in a fight like this is a little much to ask, because there's basically no humans in Adventure Time or Undertale. They're considered either a lost or an other race. So in a fight in familiar territory, how would you, mid-fight, without being able to move, capture 6 human souls? Furn's soul might be one of them, but still. The other thing is that I should point out, even in this form, using the powers of the human souls, these souls retain their agency and their will, and throughout the fight help the protagonist actually heal them and hold back and right, as well as forcibly remove this transformation when done collectively after being defeated, forcibly remove this transformation from Flowey. So the odds of retaining it in a fight with no setup, right? Like, this was done in story in Undertale, right? So it's not something that, Flowey just has the ability to do whenever they feel like. This was the story builds up to them doing this, right? It's still not a guarantee that you would be able to do something like that you would be able to use these abilities to their fullest. Now, getting into the fight. This one is difficult here. And you might accuse me of fishing for this, but here's how I see it. If we are ignoring the higher transformations for the reasons that I've given, right? Flowey has very, very powerful projectile-based attacks, right? Like I said, fire is something that should just naturally be very, very good against Furn. However, as I said, Furn has all of Finn's combat experience, has a regenerating body, has a sword that cuts superhumanly well, and the factor I feel most, like putting onto the surface here, is that Flowey cannot move. Flowey is stuck in the ground or in a pot. Now, yeah, projectile, great. That's the natural thing you would need for an enemy like this. But you have a character that, like Furn, that is able to move about freely and regenerate, basically, similar to how Frisk does in Undertale, when they beat the higher evolutions of Flowey, despite the save and reset abilities. There's not much Flowey can do to ensure that Furn dies here, other than just keep using attacks, which there is also a resource system to Flowey's attacks. They are not limitless in quantity. You know, Undertale operates on a, kind of like a mana HP, system. I don't know if it's called mana, but still. Right? So, really, this is just a war of attrition. Would Furn be fast enough or resilient enough to survive Flowey's attacks? Well, Furn survived. Well, it might. I forget if it's actually him surviving or being brought back, but I believe it was him surviving, getting decimated by Finn. So I don't really see what Flowey can do to, like, how is Flowey going to capitalize on anything other than just doing the same spamming projectiles? And if Furn gets close, there's really nothing Flowey can do, because guess what? You use fire on a plant, it's going to burn, which is also going to burn you, also a plant. So, yeah, I mean, but if Flowey even got that chance, considering, like we said, there is a sword that is unnatural in nature and does the whole cuts you without you noticing thing, right? I don't think there's anything Flowey can really do to make sure Furn doesn't kill them. So you might be like, you're putting a god of death against a person reincarnated as a plant, but I think Furn wins this fight, which is very weird to say and convince myself of, but yeah, I think that's how it goes. And honestly, I think this might be the best matchup for both characters. At least it's my personal favorite. I've seen a lot of alt universe versions of heroes going against Furn, and I've seen a lot of creepy final bosses against Flowey, but that's how I see it. I'm sure there's a lot of lore that I'm missing, and probably a lot of very crucial factors I'm not putting in, but as I've described it here, that's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say Flowey wins this, and yeah, good episode. Anyway, Verbal Engine 95, see ya.